Members of the Council, I call upon my chaplain to lead us in prayer.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O God, by whose power alone we are enabled to live together as the family in Dudley, look upon our humanity and grant that wherever men and women meet in council for the ordering of this borough, your Holy Spirit may bring them into unity and lead them in the way of peace. Through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Amen. As our Saviour Christ hath commanded and taught us, we are bold to say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Spirit of truth lead you into all truth, give you grace to confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, and to proclaim the word and works of God. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be amongst you and remain with you this night and always. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence? Mike Atwood. Thank you.
Colin Alcock has been taken ill in the night. He may be a little late, but I'd like to note my apologies at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Kettle.
Councillor Tyler.
And we've also got an apology from Councillor Tyler. Thank you. Any more? Right, thank you. I'll then move on to declarations of interest. Any prior declarations of interest made under the Members' Code of Conduct have been published online. Members should also note the advice of the monitoring officer. Any member who declares a pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest will only have to withdraw from the meeting if there is a specific reference to them to the item in which they have an interest during the debate. Likewise, they will be able to vote on the budget provided that the item in which they have an interest has not specifically referred to in the motion or amendment put to the vote. I now ask members to declare any additional interest. None? Mayor's announcements. It is with great sadness that I have to report on the death of Mary Finch. On behalf of the Council, I would like to extend sincere condolence to Councillor Ken Finch and his family at this very sad time. Mrs Finch served as the Mayoress of Dudley during the 1998-1999 municipal year. Can I ask the Council to observe a period of silence as a token of respect in memory of Mary Finch? revenue budget, strategy and setting of the council tax for 2020-21. I call upon the Leader of the Council, who I understand wishes to move the suspension of the relevant council procedure rule. Yes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I move that under Council Procedure Rule 22.1, the time restriction of 5 minutes referred to in Council Procedure Rule 14.4 be suspended to enable the Cabinet Member for Finance and Legal Services and the lead spokesperson from the opposition group to speak for longer than 5 minutes on these reports, and to enable the Cabinet Member for Finance and Legal Services to speak for longer than 5 minutes in exercise of his right to reply to the debate.
Have you a second? All agree? Revenue, budget, strategy and setting of the council tax for the year 2020-21. I call upon Councillor Steve Clark.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I would like to thank our Section 151 officer, his deputy and their team for the work they've done in preparing this report. I would like to offer my congratulations to our new MPs in Dudley, Marco Longhi in Dudley North and Suzanne Webb in Stourbridge, and to our re-elected MPs, James Morris in Halesowen, Mike Wood in Dudley South. I'd like to congratulate our own rising star, Nicola Richards, for her victory in West Bromwich East. They're very lucky to have such a determined, dedicated politician, and she'll be missed in this chamber. Dudley is a low-spending, low-taxing council that has already made net savings of £65 million, which is 21% in real terms over the last 9 years. Our low rate of council tax means that compared with the average metropolitan council, we have around £14 million per year less spending power. We have to work harder to manage within our available finances. For councils our size, we have a low level of reserves, enough at the beginning of this year to cover 20% of a year's expenditure. For the average council, the same statistic came out significantly higher at 44%. Our external auditors, Grant Thornton, have acknowledged improvement in our financial position, but they note that risk still remains, and they recommend we do more to grow our income base. Over the last 9 years, we have seen our overall resources fall by £100 million, which is 31% in real terms. But our financial outlook is changing, and it's changing for the better. As we go into next year, we will see our resources rise by a little of over 3% in real terms, the largest increase in a decade. In deciding how to spend this money, we've consulted with the residents of Dudley, and we've had a good response. We've listened to those responses, telling us that the people's top priorities are vulnerable adults and children. In children's services, we have seen Ofsted remove their judgment of inadequate, and services are improving well. We have also had the recent favourable peer challenge review of adult social care that was reported to Cabinet last September. Over the next 3 years, we will be providing additional investment, rising to £7.7 million a year into adult social care, helping to manage hospital demand as well as rising numbers, complexity and costs of care. We're providing additional investment rising to £760,000 per year into children's services, mainly to support our services to children with special education needs and disabilities. We also need to ensure that Dudley is a place where people want to live and to set up businesses. We're already seeing big changes. We're seeing visible progress on the ground with a metro extension from Wednesbury to Brierley Hill. Funding secured to see at last the demolition of Cavendish House, an eyesore that has blotted the skyline of Dudley for decades. And my thanks go to our combined authority Mayor Andy Street for his assistance in helping to raise these funds. We're seeing the development of a groundbreaking new music institute at Cable Plaza in Brierley Hill. Over the next 3 years, we will be building in additional investment into regeneration, rising to £420,000 per year, including money for feasibility studies, so that we can keep the pace of development. This will be boosted by additional money from government, feasibility funding of £150,000 from the Future High Street Fund for Brierley Hill, thanks to our Dudley South MP, Mike Wood, and £173,000 from the Town's Fund for Dudley College, and the potential to bring in millions more as detailed proposals are developed. Our investment will also include £20,000 a year to further expand the CCTV deployment to keep our streets and public places safe. Over the next 3 years, we're proposing additional investment, rising to £3.1 million per year into public realm, including £330,000 a year for roads and footways, £250,000 a year to enhance cleaning of streets and public places, £510,000 a year to expand waste collection to meet growing demand, up to £210,000 a year into tree maintenance and the management of ash dieback, £100,000 a year for improved road signage. We're reinstating the budget for planting new trees in the borough that the Labour group axed when they were in control, and a range of other investments in gully cleaning, parks, public right-of-way, football pitches. From 2021-22, we propose £250,000 a year to pay for additional police community support officers. We'll be investing in essential support to our frontline services, including a new IT system to improve the effectiveness of social care and help to ensure the safety of vulnerable adults and children. In spite of funding and spending pressures, I am pleased to confirm that we are able to deliver a balanced budget for 2020-21, including a financial contingency of £2 million per year to manage risks. As I have said, Dudley is a low-taxing, low-spending council, and we are not a council that is rich in terms of reserves. As the government conducts its fair funding review of local government finance for 2021-22 onwards, there will be both opportunity and uncertainty. Rest assured that I will work tirelessly alongside our local MPs to ensure that we get the best possible financial deal that recognises the needs of Dudley. We're a low-taxing, low-spending council, but we are also a prudent council, and we need to be financially sustainable in the face of financial uncertainty. This report, therefore, proposes a council tax increase of 3.99%, Even with this increase, we will still be setting the lowest council tax in the West Midlands and one of the lowest in the country. Mr. Mayor, in December, the people of Dudley overwhelmingly voted in a general election for a government that can get things done. This authority is no different. As you've heard in our budget today, this Conservative-led authority is delivering safer, cleaner streets, better infrastructure. We're regenerating the region more than any other time in several generations, creating jobs, prosperity and growth, delivering for the people of Dudley. Mr. Mayor, I move this report and its recommendations.
Formally seconded, Mr. Mayor. Well said.
I now call upon Councillor Peatlow to speak on behalf of the opposition group.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to start off my contribution just by paying respect to one of our councillors who's actually here this evening, who has gone, I believe many of us in this chamber, has gone over and beyond in turning up to the council meeting tonight. I mean, Ken Finch has done, to turn up this evening, Ken, I think goes absolutely to the core of the individual human being that you are. And I know that everybody within this council chamber thinks exactly the same. I would like to... And I would just like to add to that, Mr. Mayor, just for Ken, over the coming weeks and the months, that we're here for you. And that's not just the Labour group, that is the whole of this council chamber. I'd like to thank the leader, Patrick Carley, who took time out of a really busy day to contact me today to say that the budget would be going ahead as it is, there'd be no requirement, and would be totally understood if you were not here. I think it's a credit to your many years' service, and thank you so much, Ken, for being here this evening. I'd like to follow on from Councillor Clark, just to remind him that we have another Member of Parliament that I think we should pass our congratulations on to as well, serving the Republic of Cosley very well in Pat McFadden. And I would continue the congratulations that have been passed on, one within our own council chamber for the work that is going on there. I would also like to, Mr. Mayor, agree with large chunks of the budget report as outlined by Steve Clark. And one of them's around a recurring theme. And whether it be Conservative control or Labour control, we look at the issues of a low-spending, low-taxing authority. There were times, however, where that was taken as a badge of honour. And I believe those days are long behind us. And that is why we do not oppose the council tax rise of 3.99%. Indeed, we would make the point that we would be £1 million better off if the Conservative Party had supported our council tax a few years ago. Because, of course, you're quite right, that council tax base is essential for being able to deliver those services to the people that we serve. And Councillor Clark is also correct when he talks about the £100 million that has been taken from authorities like Dudley. But of course he concludes it there without following on to the natural conclusion of who has taken the money away. We know it, they know it. It's a Conservative government who has stripped that money from the hard-working people of Dudley. And we will not, on this side of the House, shy away from holding those people accountable who are responsible. So that's one message for our new Member of Parliament. Why have the Tories got it in for the people of Dudley? And he's quite correct when he talks about the 33% that has been stripped from the hard-working people of Dudley, the postcode lottery of local government. Because we could be exactly the same people, Mr. Mayor, living in Surrey or other leafy suburbs where we know, and you know, that that cut would have been far less severe. So we support the 3.99% increase. We support Councillor Clark in his condemnation in all but name of the Conservative government for taking £100 million off us. And we accept that we're a low-spending, low-taxing authority. But then it comes to the difference between what you do around those priorities. Last Monday, Mr. Mayor, we had a detailed discussion around the Conservative group's priorities. The £4 million refurbishment of this council chamber. Market supplements for posts that have never been market testing. So the people of Dudley, as Councillor Clark outlined, recognise the significant difference between us and them. Referring to page 17, Mr. Mayor, of the council report, it's important that we recognise the risk, and it's important for people in the gallery when they go away, and good of Dave Brownhill to return. Hopefully he was watching the Tottenham versus Wolves highlights from yesterday when he had to leave early. It was a fantastic third goal, and of that me, Councillor Clark, can wholeheartedly agree. But this council budget, the surprises are in what it doesn't say. Let me give an example. The report is littered with the word significant risk. It's mentioned many times within the report. And I'd like to thank again the leader for the briefing last week with regard to the very light rail. But we all need to recognise that it remains a significant risk. And certainly from my point of view, I do not pay or give as much confidence in the Black Country LEP's potential around the enterprise zone as maybe the lead member opposite does. And I think we've got to scrutinise and keep this under review. It also talks, and this is of importance certainly for people in Halesowen or Stourbridge, it talks about the leisure centres. Now let us go on a short historical lesson. When the leisure centres were first brought up, it was to bring additional savings into this council chamber, into our coffers, around £400,000 per year. Where's that money gone? And there seems to be an acceptance, and I think it's an acceptance that you are not taking seriously, Councillor Clark, that not only will it not return £400,000 per year, it's going to cost us hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. And it is at risk. What isn't said within this report is just as important as what is said within this report. And it talks about all of those other areas as well. I do not believe that the enterprise zone will deliver what you expect it to do. Fair funding for Dudley. This party, indeed cross-party, have written several times to the government minister talking about, as Councillor Clark outlined, the £100 million of cuts. What correspondence, Councillor Clark, have you embarked in since last May demanding a fair deal for Dudley? What correspondence have you sent? What correspondence has been received? And if the answer to that is you haven't, then I think you should very well get on and do it sharply. Mr. Mayor, I would like to propose an amendment to the budget as outlined, and I believe officers will shortly have that amendment to offer round. I'm looking, and yeah, I'll be it. Yep. And it's a 9-part amendment. I shall continue to talk through because I expect what the response will be when it gets on later on. And I will literally just give a short paragraph on each of the points and why the Labour group are proposing it. And I would like to add my thanks to the Section 151 officer and his staff for the dutiful way that they have gone about proposing a competent and a prudent amendment. Point 1 states that subject to consultation with the unions, all changes to staff, terms and conditions approved in February 2017 should be reversed with effect from 21-22. The simple reason this amendment is put forward is last week in this council chamber, we heard the priorities of this administration of giving an additional £24,000 per year for posts that have never been market tested, yet ignoring those that had to have a cut when the times were difficult. We demand that our staff are properly looked after. Point 2, Mr. Mayor, the £30,000 per year case officer. We have yet to see the argument for the requirement of that. So our amendment suggests that that should not be approved. But indeed we recognise that investment, and we would like to put it where we believe that money will be better seen by people in our community. So rather than have an officer look after the members of Parliament and the 72 officers, let's spend that £30,000 per year giving an enhanced litter collection, cleaning the public signage and more frequent road sweeping, increasing that from £250 to £280,000. And if Councillor Clark is correct on what he says from the 1,070-odd people what returned, I have yet to see one respondent, one single respondent, who talks about a case member system. But I've seen hundreds talk about our streets and our litter collections. Amendment 4, paragraph 4, Mr. Mayor, talks about the revenue impact from the council house repairs from 21-22 at a cost of £200,000. We had a robust conversation in this very chamber last week, and member after member talked about the importance of sending it through scrutiny, and more detail needs to be had. For example, how much of that money is going to be spent on carbon neutralising this council house? Indeed, I could go further. What paragraph in this whole budget addresses the issues of the environment? And that is why Councillor Barnett is so correct to bring that motion forward last year. And this budget demonstrates clearly how seriously this authority take green issues. Point 5, and I'll read this one out slowly, because Councillor Phipps made a contribution in this council chamber only last week with regard to getting to grips with interim and consultancy. £10.8 million. So far. £10.8 million spent this year on interim and consultancy. And looking around here, I have a feeling that that may be set to rise. It is simply unacceptable, and something needs to be done. So what does need to be done? Well, I think we should ask the very affable Chief Executive, very well finely dressed here, to go away and task to address this situation and to look at it at pace. And then we should use that money to, when we look at the PCSOs, not putting it back for a further financial year, but saying, based upon the reports of people filling in the survey, our communities want protection and they want it now. That is what those 1,000 people were saying. We believe this amendment addresses it. And let's just have a very brief history lesson on the police and crime support officers. Because it's actually a Lib Dem and Labour council, Councillor Arley was reminding me of this, who amended a Conservative budget back in 2004 that took away the police community support officers. And we got it back in. But of course that only lasted another 3 years, because in 2008 the Conservative Council took it away. It's time, Mr Mayor, to bring them back with effect from June of this year. But also, listening to people in our community, people believe that in addition to the support that we can work, we need people in our communities. How many of us on all sides, when we look at what's going on in our community, would love to have those individuals that we can go to as elected members to assist in what is going on within their community? And that is what we're looking at with regard to item 7. That we look towards how we can implement that, Mr Mayor, with effect from this year. But also importantly, paragraph 9 or point 9 looks at social housing. Now, is it unreasonable to request that when a new development is undertaken, that 50% of those new houses should be socially affordable? I don't think that, in 2020, with all of the issues that we have, is an unreasonable request. And it's one that time and time again is overtaken. And I accept not always at the councillor's responsibility, because simply the government have allowed the powers to be in the hand of the developers rather than the power in the hand of those elected to serve. But we believe that 50% is correct. And importantly, to show our commitment that that development should not go on greenbelt land, and it should not go on green and open spaces. Even if we're appointing people who have got videos to say to the contrary, we believe that you should not build on that land. So, Mr Mayor, those are the amendments that I outline. They're the amendments discussed within the Labour group, taking on board the very points that Councillor Clark refers to in what the people of this borough have suggested. So, Mr Mayor, we support 3.99%. We support the fact that this council has been fleeced by £100 million by your government, and we will stand shoulder to shoulder when we fight for that fair deal for Dudley. But there's some wrongs that have got to be righted in the amendment that we put forward. We need to move at pace. We need to give the people of Dudley what they wish. And with that, Mr Mayor, I formally move this amendment.
Have you seconded the amendment, Councillor Lowe?
Formally seconded, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to say a few words in support of the amendment. First of all, may I echo Councillor Lowe's comments and to thank Councillor Finch for his dedication for being here this evening. Secondly, to move on to the budget amendment itself, I am also not convinced that the proposal for a case officer to manage councillor, MP and corporate complaints and inquiries at £30,000 per year is at this stage necessary. I do feel that we need to look at existing resources to see what the issues are there, and I do support that money being redirected into enhanced litter collection, cleaning of public signage and more frequent road sweeping. And the reason for that is because in my ward I am getting increasingly complaints and concerns raised about litter, about dirty streets and about dirty signage. And bearing in mind my ward and other areas in the borough, not just for residents' benefit but also people passing through and visitors, we want the borough to look the best that it can be. Now, we have lots of friends groups who do excellent work, but quite frankly, the demand for litter to be picked and cleansing is well beyond their capacity. So I would probably like to see some of this redirected money being used to help to stimulate and support new groups picking litter in the borough, and a lot of them already exist, but there could be more. Secondly, we do have a company that enforces litter. We do have litter enforcement company. We don't pay anything for their services, but that means they are working and enforcing in the profitable areas like the towns. And actually in my ward, people want litter, they want enforcement in those areas that are less populated, like open spaces, nature reserves and some of the suburban areas. So I think that this money could be well directed, and further on in the amendments, they could work well with the community and with the community protection officers. So in closing, Mr Mayor, I say that this 30,000 should be redirected, and I think it's certainly, for what is suggested it should be spent on, is a far better use of that resource. Thank you.
I now propose we take a break for 5 minutes so that members can actually go through the amendment before I open the debate. 5 minutes. A lengthy document, Councillor Hawley, and I just... Yeah. No, I've got that one, yeah. If that's the case then, the discussion is now on the amendment moved by Councillor Lowe. Speakers. At this point, any member who are indicated to speak on the original motion are asked to remove their request to speak. We're doing the amendment. Yep. So anyone indicated to speak on the motion, I'm now taking the amendment first, but anyone wishes to speak on the amendments. So first of all, I call on Councillor Hawley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, a few points. First of all, we won't support this amendment, and I'll tell the opposition why. When we were in opposition and we wanted to put forward amendments, I had the courtesy of contacting then Councillor Sparks and Councillor Lowe to explain our amendment and why we wanted to put it forward. They still refused it, so it went to a vote, but we had the courtesy to do just that. The Labour Party made a big play last Monday, just a week ago tonight, on not having proper scrutiny. Now, we have spent, and Councillor Clark and the team have spent, a good many months preparing this budget. If you seriously expect us to nod through £2-3 million worth of further spending without that relevant scrutiny, then you have really lost the plot as an opposition. Because you cannot say 1 week, scrutinise a decision for spending £4 million, and a week later want to nod something through when you've given members literally 2 or 3 minutes notice. If you had have discussed this with Councillor Clark last week, we would have gone through the Conservative group last Thursday, and we may well have come to some agreement on the majority of what's in this amendment. Moving on to the detail, the case officer, Councillor Foster, is, you will no doubt complain, as will many members in this chamber, when their issues cannot be raised and resolved satisfactorily quickly enough for elected members. This is about putting those backroom staff in place so those members can have their concerns addressed more quickly and efficiently. The next point, Mr Mayor, is the majority of this amendment concerns PCSOs. Now, we will have those additional PCSOs, but the only reason there's a slight delay is because of the Labour elected Police and Crime Commissioner, who didn't want to originally support this, and it was only when the Conservative candidate for that role said, I will support this, he said, outstanding idea, happy to support it should I win that election. Then David Jamieson came cap in hand, I will support this measure. Not only that, Mr Mayor, but Mr Jamieson, I will give him credit here, having seen the light. He has given me assurances he will provide the 5, and not only the 5, but he has the budget provided by Boris to not only provide 5 additional PCSOs, but he may even stretch to 7 or 8. So those PCSOs will be recruited, and they will be out there providing the eyes and ears for our communities. And that is a clear commitment met from last May on this side of the chamber, when we said we would deliver additional CCTV coverage and a new control room, and indeed 5 PCSOs, and we're going to more than double that with either a continued Labour Police and Crime Commissioner or hopefully a Conservative elected one. And finally, Mr Mayor, on the subject of staff conditions, let it be known that these conditions were brought in by Pete Lowe himself, and it will be this side of the chamber that addresses those concerns, probably later in the year. And we have that contingency fund, and yes, Councillor Lowe is quite right, there are several risks. Until we know the outcome of those risks in more detail, I think it's prudent to hold some of that funding back. If in the summer we are convinced that we have managed that risk to an acceptable level, then we can look at the staff conditions. We can then get on with the recruitment of the PCSOs. And Mr Mayor, if the Labour Party want to talk to us, we can possibly look at some of the other recommendations, but we will not do it with a moment's notice. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Orley. As we're now discussing the amendment, I now call upon Shaukat Ali.
Okay, thank you, Mr Mayor. It doesn't matter how this Tory administration dresses up their budget. There is nothing in it for the people of St Thomas's Ward, and the issues that affect them, like fly tipping on litter, antisocial behaviour, increasing levels of crime, roads blighted with potholes, and nothing for the young people. Councillor Kesey recently travelled all the way from Sedgley with his friends to lend a hand with clearing up some fly-tipped rubbish in my ward. And I hope that it's not going to be all talk tonight he's going to be taking some action tonight and putting the money where his mouth is and supporting the Labour's amendments so that he isn't troubled to come to my ward again. Let me also make it clear to him that fly tipping is not a legacy of Labour councillors, as he and Marco Longhi believe. It's a failure of this Tory council not investing in wards like mine, which has caused this epidemic across the borough. The people of St Thomas's Ward put their trust and confidence in me and expect me to stand up on their behalf and be their strong voice. And I see it as my duty and responsibility to fight for fairness for all and speak up on issues that affect them. Mr Mayor, as has been said, a decade of Tory austerity and some £100 million cut to Dudley Council funding has decimated services to the bone. And more cuts are expected as a result of the Tory fair funding review, which will take money away from Dudley and hand it to places like Surrey and Hampshire. Not only this, Mr Mayor, last week the Marmot Review highlighted that women's life expectancy is now worse in the 10% most deprived neighbourhoods, and their children can expect to have worse lives than their mothers. This is not acceptable and not a good news for people in St Thomas's Ward, which is amongst the top 10% in the country, Mr Mayor. A quote in The Guardian sums it all up and states that the tombstone on the Conservative government should read, and I quote, "Here lies the Conservative Party. It brought death to the country it claimed to love. It killed the working class it claimed to represent. It said it was for the North, but won't keep the Northerners alive." End of quote. Mr Mayor, Labour's amendments to the budget are common sense and support low-paid workers who deliver our essential frontline services we all rely on. They are talking about tackling fly tipping and litter to keep our borough clean. They are about keeping our communities safe so that people can go about their everyday business without the fear of crime. They are about protecting the green belt so that people can enjoy the natural environment for themselves and future generations. And they are about delivering more houses that people can afford. Mr Mayor, these amendments address people's concerns and not the Tory Council priorities of wasting £4 million of taxpayers' money on refurbishing the council house, mega bonuses for the directors and selling off the green belt. Mr Mayor, I wholeheartedly support Labour's amendments to the budget.
To retract part of that last statement, this side of the chamber is certainly not selling off any green belt to developers.
Okay. Okay. I'll move on. Councillor Cowell.
Mr Mayor,
Yeah.
as the Labour Party don't have their numbers for the second meeting in succession, I move that we now put the vote.
Not had enough debate. Not had enough debate, Mr Mayor.
You're not putting the vote.
It's a debate. It's a debate.
Do we want me to do that? Right. So,
You have to decide.
I know that. I'll decide we'll go with it. It's seconded, yeah.
You put to the procedural motion, the question we put.
Right, so, is that down here?
No, it's not. As you say, I now put the procedural motion, the question be put.
Right. I now put the procedural motion that the question now be put. What do you want me to do? Put the vote?
Yeah. So you put the procedural motion, the question be put.
I'll put the procedural motion for the request to be put to the vote. The wish to be put. Yeah, okay. I made that clear. Be put. Yeah. Yeah. What's the word do you want me to use?
Just say you're voting now as to whether the question be put.
You're voting now as to whether the question should be put. So that makes it clear, I hope. I haven't voted. What?
That's carried.
That's carried.
Now you put the question now you take a vote on the amendment.
So now I'll take the vote on the amendment.
Councillor Tyler has a right to reply.
Right to reply first.
Yeah.
Councillor Clark, sorry, has a right to reply.
I know that. I vote on the sheet. You got a right to reply. Do you want?
You have to decide the one access right to reply.
Yeah. Do you want me to read this out here?
Not yet.
No.
We're hearing it again. We're hearing the same song from Labour over and over again. Over and over again. Let's go to the vote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We get to the vote.
Substantive motion.
Are there any further speakers on the substantive motion? Yeah, yeah. That's your time now to do it. Yeah. A different list now we're on. Yeah. Have you got them down? Yeah.
Start with Jacob Cooper.
Call upon Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this budget, the biggest thing that this budget shows us today is that Dudley is on the up, with vast investment into regeneration into the borough, investment into frontline services that the residents of this borough hold so dear to them, and not a single cut to the important services that they use. Dudley is receiving the investment it needs and deserves. One of the things in this budget that I welcome wholeheartedly is the fact that care leavers will now receive full exemption from council tax. It's important that the vulnerable people of this borough, such as care leavers, receive this council tax reduction, because we must ensure that as corporate parents we are responsible for those under our care. Also, on the subject of regeneration, we are seeing some brilliant projects in the borough. Just today, I had the pleasure of going down to Brierley Hill to see the new music college opening in September down there. And as well as that, we've also got Dudley College investing in the borough with a university centre, which is going to be a massive investment into our economy for young people in the borough. Also, we've got massive developments in research and development with the Institute of Technology, the Very Light Rail and the autonomous vehicle centres opening up in the borough, with a massive amount of investment into regeneration from that. We've also got brilliant retail establishments and also residential establishments that open up in the borough. With Portersfield development, we finally see Cavendish House being knocked down this year, and that's going to be brilliant because we're going to see investment from that into retail and residential and leisure into the borough. And I also, for my patch of the borough in Halzone, want to pay a massive tribute to Halzone Bid, who've done brilliant work in regenerating the high street and ensuring that local traders get what they deserve when it comes to the local economy. Furthermore, about the transport plans for the borough, we've seen Andy Street put forward his plan for the borough, and with that comes Dudley's metro expansion. And when we talk about climate change, one of the big things that is going to benefit
from that, and our climate action plan is the metro, as it's going to ensure that more people in the borough are using public transport. Furthermore, on a more ward-specific and Halzone-specific basis, I'm pleased to see that this budget is tackling the issues that the people of Halzone and Belvale hold dear to their heart. The empty houses premium is going to ensure that we keep houses filled in the borough and ensure that people get the housing that they deserve. Also, the recruitment of 5 new PCSOs is something that Dudley desperately needs, and it's come to the fact that the council has had to take the lead on this because Labour's Police and Crime Commissioner has failed this borough and this region for far too long when it comes to policing, and I am pleased to see that this authority is taking the lead on that. Also, we're going to see £300,000 over the next 3 years into tree maintenance, and also £50,000 in planting new trees to ensure that this borough is kept beautiful for all the residents of this borough, and also to ensure that we plant new trees to develop that carbon sink in the towns and the borough. Also, in repairing new roads, the opposition talk about making sure litter picks are invested in. But in this borough, this provides for green care. This provides for keeping our roads safe and keeping our roads up to date. This budget provides the resources to ensure that our towns are not only safe, but they're also kept up to date when it comes to maintenance. So I'm pleased to see that. And for the people of Halzone as well, we've got in place improvement for the borough's football pitches, and also for grass. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And for grass cutting of the closed churchyards, which residents of my ward in Belvale have brought up several times. So all around, we see that this borough this budget provides for this borough and invests in the things that residents hold dear to them. So I welcome it wholeheartedly, and I want to thank the administration for putting money into the things that my residents care about so much. Thank you.
Councillor Muggle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, I was listening to the chaplain's prayer, help us make wise decisions. How does a controlling party think it's wise to spend over 4 million on the council house, as quoted by Mr. Clark said, we are not a council rich in reserves, and yet we've spent 1.8 million on consultancy fees. How can it be wise when frontline services are being cut on a daily basis? How can it be wise when we have children in my ward sleeping on empty stomachs? How can it be wise when people are struggling to find money to pay bills? In Dudley, I thought we did what was right for the people of Dudley. However, this seems like just that we're doing things to prop up House Harley.
Councillor Buttery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome this budget because of the investment in children's services and the fact that the Conservative Party has made children's services, with an emphasis on the SEND programme, this council's #1 priority, as giving children and families hope and raising aspirations for our children and young people is one of the greatest things we can do as a council. So I'm very pleased to say there are no cuts in children's services this year. In fact, we have increased the budget by 600,000 to make sure we have the right staff in the right departments. We have recognised the need for more secondary school places, and in the Brierley Hill Township, we are currently funding the expansion of Wordsley and Crestwood schools. All the young people who went to Stourbridge College were found suitable courses, and we have kept the site as an educational facility by supporting the OSH proposal. We currently have the lowest number of children in care for 5 years, and all places are being reviewed to make sure they're most appropriate. Our agency social worker rate is down from a high of 50% under Labour to 23% now. As I'm sure members will agree that the aspiration is for many Dudley children to be in the borough as possible, but for some children the best places are out of borough. So we do need sometimes to keep the children out of borough if they're with connected families or specialist provision, or to be moved to for their own safety. Our DCS costs less than half than the Labour one did. We have excellent links with our connection teams and designated school leads to have the aspiration of zero exclusion rates. Following the recommendations from Children's and Corporate Scrutiny Committees, we have introduced the council tax reduction schemes, which means that none of our care leavers pay council tax until the age of 25. I would therefore think that this is an ongoing work that we are doing within this group, within Children's Services, and with Councillor Ridney as well. We work a lot cross-party on this. But I would like to thank my colleagues in the Conservative group, and especially the Cabinet, for seeing this journey most importantly from the child's perspective and giving their support and drive to this project. There is a proverb that says, "A hope fulfilled is a tree of life," and I hope to see many more children's hopes and aspirations achieved as they grow and flourish in this borough. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Baydon.
One of these weeks, Mr Mayor, you'll get it right. Right, yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Couple of points, actually, I'd like to address. Firstly, I'd just like to pick up on Councillor Cooper's comments around Cavendish House. And whilst we do absolutely welcome the money that the Andy Street has found from the Combined Authority for the demolition, it's very interesting that my understanding is actually that that is not for any form of leisure or any form of retail, that I understand it is solely for housing. The business case, Councillor Harley says it's for housing, so then you need to have that conversation with the Combined Authority. That's the business case. The other points I want to pick up on are around agency staff and interims, and whilst absolutely it's refreshing to see that agency staff rates are coming down, no service flourishes under interims and agency arrangements. And I accept that there are occasions when we do have to use interims. This should be explicitly time limited. Interims should not be allowed to roll on indefinitely, as I know they have been. That's not only due to cost, but due to morale of staff and future growth of the service. And as soon as an interim is appointed, as we have done in public health, a permanent job should be advertised. There should never be a gap, and I can see no reason why this cannot happen every time. Where appropriate, we should seek to promote interims from within. It's a career development opportunity. It promotes healthy culture within the organisation. The use of agency where not seasonal, and I accept that use of agency staff goes on across the council. It's not just in children's, although children's have been particularly badly hit. Rarely offer continuity of service for the client. They don't have any personal investment. Where someone is brought in to deliver a project, I would like reassurance that fixed-term contracts will be used going forward rather than expensive consultancy fees, as have been used in the past. I know Children's Services has suffered and the efforts have been made, and I also know that Sandwell went rogue, but I'd like an absolute commitment that in the next 12 months there will be dedicated work to make Dudley a borough of choice to work in. If we offered a more comprehensive package to permanent staff, reduce what's on offer to agency, wherever it may be, we may reverse that trend. And just to pick up on the final point I'd like to make, and that's around the pressures on adult care as in the risk table on page 56. So we know that the care market is incredibly fragile. We know that with the increase in the living wage, and actually, obviously we all believe that the living wage is the right thing to do. And I know Councillor Barlow will have fought hard to have the IBCF and the winter pressures money ring-fenced, but I do think it's a little disingenuous in the press release of 7.4 or 7.7 million new investment. That's in fact repackaged old grants from what I can see. And if we want our elderly and vulnerable to be safe and to be cared for in the settings of their choice, then we have to invest, not just use current grant money. I would like to have seen much more investment into frontline services for our older people. I'd like to see that we're able to maintain the good work that we've done across this council in moving this council forward. I have worries that we're going to be able to achieve that with the current pressures on adult care services. And I just want to make the point, and I know we've debated the 4 million, but I think it just puts it into some context for me, where actually £4 million could purchase an extra 266,000 domiciliary care hours in this borough.
Thank you, Councillor Payton. Thank you. I do apologise. Yeah, I know I'll get there eventually. Yeah. Councillor Shakespeare.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Councillor Lowe said that the Tories have got it in for the people of Dudley. Well, Labour has had it in for the people of Dudley for a very long time, and for the entire time they were in power, when they cut frontline services to the bone, I believe for political purposes, and we have spent time since being in power bringing back these services to a standard that our residents deserve. I would have loved to have put £280,000 into enhancing our litter collection and cleaning of the borough. However, I had to put £50,000 for the recycling go bins that were introduced last year, because the funding was there for the bins, but they expected our existing services, which were already struggling, to be able to empty these bins. So, unfortunately, we could only put £250,000 in because we had to cover a failing Labour amendment last year of £50,000. We've done really well this year. We have increased the closed churchyards from 2 to 4 times a year. Labour cut it from 7 to 2 when they were in power. We've also increased, we're now putting a maintenance programme into the public rights of way. Labour actually put it on a phone up and get them cleaned, so there was no regular maintenance programme. So I'm pleased now that we are able to put a maintenance programme in for the public rights of way. We've also increased resources for litter, dog bins, the frequency due to the demand of the use of our parks. If I use Mary Stevens as an example, we had over 1 million visitors to that park last year. And obviously we're recognising that with that comes a lot of waste that needs to be dealt with. And also traffic regulation orders. We've increased our investment in the road repairs, resurfacing of potholes, and 2 new traffic engineers to speed up the process of the traffic regulation orders, which I know all councillors and residents ask for on a yearly basis, and also to meet the demand from the regeneration projects that will be coming into this borough, which I'm very pleased about. We've also the new officer to deal with the complaints and the replies. Sadly, we have approximately 73,000 inquiries for my portfolio come through Dudley Council Plus on an annual basis. We also have put this in place because we get complaints from councillors saying that they're not getting a response fast enough. And obviously, it was Labour that cut the back office staff completely from my area, and now we're putting something in place to actually try and help their inquiries and get them answered. Also, it's there because a lot of councillors in this chamber, they go straight to the officers and stop them doing their job. So now you have a streamlined way of actually getting your inquiries dealt with and also getting a response. There are many, many other things that we've put in place, like the tree maintenance budget, an extra £100,000 and a £10,000 for tree planting. I say extra, but that's reinstated because it was Labour that cut the tree planting budget and it was Labour that cut the tree maintenance budget. So we're now bringing all this back into the way it should be, and hopefully in the future we will be able to put more. We've also put an additional cost for waste collection because obviously new houses are being built in this borough, and it was 2013 when we bought in the wheelie bins. And since then we've probably had another 3,500 properties built. Overall, I am very pleased with the budget, and I'm very pleased with what my portfolio has been able to put forward in this budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ridney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Cooper over there for bringing the attention to this chamber of the council tax coverage for care leavers. Can I just say to council though, that came originally from the Corporate Parenting Board, a cross-party committee, and we all agreed that was the right thing to do. While I accept what Councillor Busby said, that it went to various scrutiny committees, that was what was needed, what was done, and it came from all of us. We are all corporate parents, so let's not anybody claim, let's just say it was a decision of all of us and it was a right decision, and thank you for doing it. Thank you very much. I'd also like to to say the money that's been poured into children's services, I'm very pleased that there have been no cuts. However, the money that has been poured in, as Councillor Butcher alluded to, has been put in for very specific reasons and to correct some of the wrongs that have gone on in the past. However, that does not mean that we will not monitor that closely to make sure that the outcomes are what we need. And this is this sort of investment is a once in a lifetime to really get this right. So it's important that we do work closely together, but that we do maintain that these are the outcomes that we want for our children, because this is the future of the borough. The other issue, and everybody, I can see Councillor Millward looking, she'll know what I'm going to talk about. Page 17, 68. Adult social care and children's social care ICT. I'm sorry, I have got to raise this. You know, I've been banging on about this for years now. I'd really like to see an end to it, but I noticed the comment in it saying about that the budget may have to be increased. Can we have some idea of how much this system is going to cost us? I'm saying this because I sat in a meeting only a few weeks ago where one of the charges that was made about this borough was the poor quality ICT equipment that our social workers had. I'm not going to go into the details the meeting was about, but that was the comments that was made. That was extremely embarrassing. We challenged it, but that is not what we should be going. Our social workers should be frontline, have state-of-the-art digital equipment to do the jobs they need. They should not be coming back to the offices to actually write reports. They should be able to put those details down when they are out on frontline, when they are interviewing clients, when they are dealing with children and when they are dealing with parents. So whatever investment we make, this system needs to be up and running. This equipment needs to be replaced, because it was also one of the charges that was made to us during the Ofsted inspection and is still waiting to be done. I will continue to battle on with this until it is put right. We shouldn't be a secondary borough to our partners within services for children. So I would like to know what sort of a cost this is going to be now and when we are likely to see this actually installed. Thank you.
Councillor Barlow.
To the seat. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to go slightly off topic to respond to Councillor Baton and also to Councillor Ridney. Councillor Ridney, I'll make sure that you get the appropriate updates with regards to the successor programme. I know that there is a detailed programme plan, so I'll make sure that you and Councillor Baton have copies of that. Councillor Baton, you made a very valid point about the fragile care market. I've already had conversations with my officers to do some more work on that and look at the funding that is available to those. So once we're in a position that we have the sufficient detail on that, I'll make sure that is shared with you as well. So going back to my script, Mr. Mayor, I think there is very little for me to add to what my friend and Cabinet colleague has already put before this chamber this evening. This is an excellent budget, which continues to invest in and support the people of this borough. I'm also grateful that a precept of 2% has been added once again for explicit use within adult social care. I'd like to use this time to have on my feet to acknowledge the work, determination, innovation of my directors of adult social care and public health, and all the staff within those directorates. They've delivered so much within the medium-term financial strategy and continue to review our services to ensure they remain fit for purpose and remodelling wherever the need arises without any loss of service to the public. I'd like to also thank the Leader of the Council to ensuring that the Improve Better Care Fund was rightfully ring-fenced to support our vulnerable elderly communities. We have frontline social care staff working inside Russell's Hall Hospital, getting our residents out of a hospital environment as quickly and as safely as possible, and thereby keeping delayed transfers of care down. Working alongside healthcare professionals, their presence continues to help the hospital system under significant pressure. We've remodelled our packages of care, which allows greater use of technology and single-handed care, promoting greater independence for people in their own homes. As reported in the press last week, £300,000 of the IBCF helped to fund our scams unit for this borough, part of our amazing trading standards team. To date, it's estimated that the unit has saved nearly £4.5 million being given over to scammers. Not a bad investment return on that, is it? Our environmental health and trading standards teams have worked with police to shut down traders. Another fantastic achievement and a great example of partnership working to stop traders selling illegal goods. We've supported the voluntary sector in a completely different way through the Innovation Fund, seeing the results firsthand, both Councillor Baton and I, and it's brilliant and a credit to everyone who has been involved. We have a nationally recognised adult social care team which are transformative in areas such as telecare, and we continue to win and be nominated for awards. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank my opposition colleague for our close working relationship over the last year, and also for her insight and support. It's a rarity to have such a positive arrangement, and this was positively highlighted in the recent peer review. We cannot and will never be complacent, no matter who has control of this council. So I reiterate the intention that I made at last week's meeting of the council to write to the relevant secretaries of state, with my colleague opposite, to again ask that the future funding of adult social care is made a priority in this new government. Mr Mayor, I endorse this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Councillor Cowell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In Dudley, we have comparatively low council tax compared to, due to various government incentives or restrictions applied over the years to keep tax rates down, and that has been alluded to by other speakers. We have also been impacted by the payment of new homes bonus, which is paid by government for new build homes and conversions, but is paid for by top slicing other funding which would be paid based on levels of need. This in turn has led to a level of reserves well below the national average. Despite the improvement this year, they still sit at around 20% as opposed to 44%. We now face the uncertainty from the fair funding review into local government finance. Against this background, the Tories are making long-term plans to finance the refurbishment of the council house at an annual revenue cost of £200,000. This alone is 10% of the value of the annual budget contingency. We, on this side, would use that money, along with other funds freed up by a reduction in agency costs. We would use that very differently. We would fund community protection officers working across the borough in conjunction with PCSOs, neighbourhood police and environmental health and trading standards. Their priority will be to tackle crime and ASB by working within communities and providing a high visibility presence to reassure, deter and investigate issues. In Walsall, CPOs are involved in licensing enforcement and tackling environmental crime, ASB and unauthorised encampments. In Nottingham, CPOs have powers to tackle late night noise, house parties and on-street drinking. CPOs can be given powers to carry out a variety of public protection activities. CPOs will provide a natural link between neighbourhood police, council enforcement and the communities that they seek to serve, producing a more coherent and structured service, more responsive to the public need. This in turn will see a reduction in clean-up and response costs by virtue of prevention and early intervention, as opposed to the incident response-based approach which currently predominates. These savings in turn could be fed back into the service. At a time of tight budgets and rising pressures, should we not be putting the public first? On this side, that is exactly what we would do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick point, really, before I talk about the budget. I do think it is disappointing that the controlling group didn't take the amendment put forward by my colleague, Councillor Lowe, more seriously. I think it was an amendment that was sensible, and it reprioritised some of the funding in this budget to the priorities of residents in the borough. But again, Mr. Mayor, this is all a matter of priorities. Our priorities are different to your priorities. Now, the point I want to raise on the main budget item, Mr. Mayor, it's quite a serious point in terms of the future financial sustainability of the council. And I think, like a lot of my colleagues, one of the most obvious things for me about the budget, reading the budget papers tonight in front of us from the controlling group, is that it really does appear to lack some of those innovative ideas that we need as a council moving forward. Now, we're asking residents to pay more in council tax, and we all know the financial situation this council's been put in as a result, as we've said this evening, of cuts from successive Conservative governments since 2010, and Councillor Clark said this himself, in terms of £100 million down since 2010, and that we need to put ourselves on a more financially sustainable footing, and even outside consultants saying that we need to grow our income base as a recommendation. Now, despite all that, Mr. Mayor, and despite the Conservatives being in control of this council now for over 12 months, and given that we're aware of the situation that we are in financially, there's nothing in this budget that would allow us to use that sort of innovative thinking and leadership which is needed to put this council on a more sustainable footing moving forward. No ideas, Mr. Mayor, in terms of further income generation, so that we could look to mitigate the impact on local people and ensure that whilst we're asking them to pay more, that we do our bit as well to look at other sources of income that we can generate, as well as just asking them to pay more council tax. Now, there's no ideas in this budget, Mr. Mayor, to replicate what other councils have done across the country, who've invested to generate that additional income, rather than relying so heavily on outside grants as this budget does. Other councils across the country who've invested in new sources of energy, saving local people money, and any profits that are made then reinvested in local services. So instead of cutting services, we invest in those instead, in addition to the income that we get from outside the council. Or councils that have invested capital as well. I mean, colleagues have mentioned it around this chamber tonight in terms of the money that we're spending on this council house. Now, instead of spending that money on the council house, that money could have been invested in our towns or areas across the borough where we could shape economic development, helping to create jobs and again to generate that further income. So, Mr. Mayor, it is disappointing when you read this budget, and I personally think it's a massive missed opportunity. It doesn't offer any innovative ideas, particularly to generate that further income that I've mentioned, enhance and ensure that the services that local people rely on and the council's finance in general is on a more sustainable footing going forward. So I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member, Mr. Mayor, whose budget this is, why it appears there aren't any of these innovative ideas, why that would be the case, particularly given that he's aware of the financial situation that we're in, and given the fact that local government, not only here in Dudley but across the country, has continually been failed by national government for the last 10 years. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of my Upper Gornal Wood Setting residents, I'd firstly like to thank Councillor Shakespeare and the team for resolving issues that I raise on a weekly basis on behalf of all my residents. I'm sure she's fed up of hearing from me all the time. During forums and returns from questionnaires received in my ward, the four most important issues residents request is spending on their frontline services. Important issues residents request all the time. Always as green care, that's the number one. In Upper Gornal Wood Setting, we have open spaces and parks, and we continue to welcome the spending on the emptying of dog and litter bins, page 44. We don't want our little Georgie stepping on something that Timmy the dog has left behind, do we? So from myself, and I'm sure my two Upper Gornal Wood Setting colleagues, we welcome the increase in spending this area within Upper Gornal Wood Setting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, just a couple of points then. So page 17.68 about the children's social care ICT system. Yeah, I was there for a year in children's services as well. I spent my lifetime in IT, and I predicted this project would run over, both in terms of delivery time and cost, and sure enough, it has. And I hope that you can keep tight control on it, because there's no two ways about it. It's a software project. It's a bit like herding cats, and it will continue to burn a hole in the budget until it's done. I'd like to commend the spending on public rights of way, and I look forward to seeing that spend played out on the Pensnet Railway Walk, maybe. It's not in my ward, but I know a lot of people use it, and currently it's virtually impassable. So that would be great if it would be up to the same standard as the Staffordshire Railway Walk, maybe. Finally, I noticed that in the consultation on the budget proposals, the average age of the respondents, the under 25s were only represented by 1.1% compared to an almost 10% of the population. And the same's a little bit played out in the 25 to 44-year-old range, where only 23% respond out of the 30% population. What I'm saying is that this budget consultation is based on the wishes and the consultation of the older population. And maybe that's why it fails to mention any sort of budget allocated towards climate change. Because climate change is absolutely important to the younger members of our community. This budget in no way allocates any monies towards climate change. And we were only talking about it last Monday, and you did tell me that you've already been working on this, already been thinking about it, clearly not thinking about it enough to put any money in the budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barnett. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of the Chamber, I fully support this budget. Not only is it a very strong financial budget, it's also a caring budget. A caring budget which is going to look after adult social care, special needs and children with disabilities. It's a caring budget because we care for the people of Dudley, we listen to the people of Dudley. Moving straight on basically is to road resurfacing. I'm pleased to see this because if you recall some years ago, it hasn't been that long ago where under your administration the road resurfacing budget was cut down. Not very long ago we heard something about potholes. What is the main thing that causes potholes? Taking out road resurfacing. And believe me, you created that. So really we do need to look at this basically. Another thing I'm very pleased with basically is the cleaning up of churchyards going from twice a year to 4 times a year. This is a necessity, but it's also a caring area. It is for me. And the reason it is a caring area for me is because the amount of work we put into the churchyards of Sedgley, where we've approached the church to get it cleared up and really come under their jurisdiction. And their answer to me was, we've got no money to do it. But ex-Councillor Corns and myself actually talked to young offenders and the probation service and got the old churchyard cleared up. And they've done a fantastic job. But following that, they changed the ruling on the churchyards, where they took out it was not challenging enough for the young offenders and the probation service. I think we need to look at this situation where, after a churchyard comes non-burial, that the responsibility can be passed on to the council. This is where my concern is, because to me, the churchyard in the first place was under the control of the church. It got the financing from the graves and the plots they were selling, and their only responsibility out of their income there was to maintain the churchyard, which they've failed to do over the years. I think we should look very closely at this situation and put some more responsibility back onto the church, because although basically the council itself only take the responsibility for maintenance churchyard, the overall control of the churchyard still comes under the church. So why is it fair that they can still maintain the land, but the maintenance of the land is covered by the authority? It's something we have to look at very closely. Mr Mayor, I fully support this.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've been a councillor now 3 years, coming up to my 4th year in May, and I have to say this is the best budget I've ever seen. It's prudent and it bodes us well for the future. Another thing I've noticed in that 3 years' time is that Councillor Lowe can't resist referring to the Tory government who've whipped away £100 million from Dudley Council. And I'm sure the Tory government have done it to a number of other councils. But what he fails to mention is that we came into power following 10 or 11 years of a Labour government who spent all the money. So there's your answer. Absolutely. Very true. 10 years. You also make mention of VLR and the fact that we're looking to borrow some money for that project, and that's a risk. However, it may not have been such a risk if Labour had been more prudent and scrutinised the Black Country LEP more thoroughly, so that they didn't over-allocate £19 million worth of investment, so that we didn't get our investment. However, we're hedging that against potential future grants. So although we may be borrowing the money, we may get the money back. Also, Cavendish House, Councillor Bateman mentioned about the mixture of retail and flats. And I think, we don't want to build a new facility there full of retail outlets which are empty. We'd rather have people in housing, flats and apartments who are living locally and spending locally. And it was Tory money, government money into the combined authority, which Andy Street has given us £700,000 to demolish it and get moving on the project and not just talk about it like your side do and never do anything. If we look at other stuff that's going on, then we've got the Metro. We've got the Wednesbury Delta being built now. And that means Dudley Metro can go up to Wednesbury and straight off to Birmingham. So that's a change in the strategy, and it's a development that's happening now. Castle Hill Works has started. The Metro is coming up the hill. The retaining wall for the Very Light Railway has started. And the importance about the Very Light Railway, it's not only going to create jobs in Dudley, it's going to create global business. Coventry Council is going to base its whole travel infrastructure on VLR, and we're part of that, and other councils will follow. We've got the music school, which people have mentioned before, in Brierley Hill. A very innovative project, which is going to have 200-odd students living there and spending money in Brierley Hill. The Dudley Leisure Centre, that's brand new. The Dudley Police Station, that's brand new. The People's Panel, where we're getting residents involved in the very early design phases of moulding where they want to live. That was Tory money from central government, a Tory project. Decision making by the people. So here we have a very prudent Tory government who have recovered from the recession and the Labour spendthriftness, and they're pouring money into the UK in projects all over the place. Just under £1 billion is coming into this borough in the next 2.5 years, which will generate jobs, it'll generate wealth and income, which is exactly what we want. Nothing as large as that has happened since the Second World War. We have a prudent administration here, on this side of the House. So, I commend the budget. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillors Order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, Mr. Mayor, I do want to start with page 43 and the funding of ensuring the availability of non-invasive digital autopsies. I wanted to highlight this as a very positive part in the budget, and something I do want to formally thank Councillor Phipps on this, because he's been involved in this for some years with me, and we've attended a number of meetings about this. And I'm delighted to see that it's in the budget. For those people familiar with traditional post-mortems, very uncivilised in nature, and if those people who have received a loved one that I have after a post-mortem, you'll realise why I've been campaigning on this for some years, and I do hope that we can formalise this and sustain it in the long term. Very, very positive. And just to be absolutely clear, this is not a matter of belief, it's a matter of dignity, and if you look at the people that use this, you'll recognise actually that it definitely isn't about one community using this. So I do want to thank Councillor Phipps, because I think he has spent his own time accompanying me to these meetings. That's all the positive stuff, by the way. I'll now move on to what I do want to talk about. I just also want to commend Councillor Shakespeare's imagination. It's fantastic. Why are you paying people to empty bins that are next to existing bins? That's what we agreed when we implemented those bins. And what we did is we said that we would support communities to move to recycling. So if you've had the wool pull over your eyes again, and you've now had to invest in people emptying bins that are located next to existing bins, then I do not know what is going on. So what I will say to you, well don't take my word for it, walk and drive around the community. You'll see that's what happened, and that's why these bins have been emptied. And the other thing I would say to you, are you saying that they remained empty for the period that they've been put in, and you've now come to the rescue, and now these bins are being implemented? So I just want to say, you know, if you're going to make comments, at least make them factual. What I will say is there is a particular theme to this budget, and it's extravagance and opulence at the expense of hardship and austerity. That's what sums up this budget. Yeah? And I'll tell you why it is, because this is what you're spending. I mean, and those grandstanding that you've done about what you're going to do about this and what you're going to do about that, let me tell you what you're spending, because you clearly haven't worked it out. £2 million on back office staff, £4 million on polishing up the council house, millions of pounds spent into back office staff, more people writing down what the problems are and giving them to existing staff, somebody telling us what's wrong with ash trees and we're going to have to pay them for the privilege of doing that. A strategic business partner is now in post, an advisor for this and an advisor for that. You've got a project and policy person, 8 people looking at IT system at the pleasure of £310,000. Have you not had enough of spending £11 million of these poor people's and my money, and you want more advisors? This is extravagance. One particular post here is 170k associated to insight officers. Well, let me give you some insight today. Let me tell you what these people want. What they want is what they've told you in that consultation. What they want is more money on the front line and less in back office. And you sit there with the pleasure and the sense of pride and achievement that you've spent £2 million on this. And then when we put forward an amendment that spends more money in the front line, and I know Councillor Harley said this is 3 million, it's not 3 million more. It's redirecting of money that is wasteful. Let me talk to you about what happened last week. We had Councillor Buttery outraged that we spent £800 on an individual some years ago let me, yes, okay. What I will say is you've spent £11 million of it. £11 million. You've denied people community protection officers. You've denied them the protection for the green belt. And I'm happy to watch you. And what I'm happy to watch you is I'm happy to put this forward. You're very rude as well, aren't you? I'm happy to put this to the vote. And I'm happy to let
Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor. Councillor Foster. The vote. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So mine's enough, is it? Yeah. Okay. So. They've sorted them out there. Yeah.
That's defeated.
That's been defeated.
Let's carry on talking.
So you want me to call Councillor Phipps?
Yeah.
Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, can I thank Councillor Zada for his first comments, and I appreciate him sweetening the pill before immediately laying in onto me afterwards. But one of the things that I think is clear from tonight's debate is that Labour might have the talk, although that is arguable, but they have certainly never walked the walk. The hot bluster from the opposition is met by cold, hard facts from this side of the chamber. As Councillor Shakespeare said, you provided new bins, not always next to current bins, but never thought how they would be emptied. They want to cut agency, but authorised not £800, but £800 a week for an interim director of children's services. Now, there's been some comments made actually about the robustness of this budget, but I want to point to the amendment that was defeated earlier on, which proposed over £3 million worth of additional spending without actually quantifying in words where that £3 million actually came from. If we look at the Labour Party right now and how they might run the budget if they were in control, I think it could be summed up by the words of the new West Midlands mayoral candidate, who famously said in 2010, there is no money left, because that's exactly what we'd have from the opposition. With regards to new officers for councillor contact, now that is because many members in this chamber, because we are active members of the community, end up being the first port of call for our residents when there is an issue. Currently, the environmental services in particular are inundated with such requests. So this isn't officers to do our personal admin, this is officers that are helping us get the things done for our local residents in our communities. Moving on to some of the comments earlier from Councillor Lowe. Maybe he enjoyed the Wolves' late winner a little bit too much last night, because I think he is suffering from a slight bit of memory loss. When he talks about the report into the market adjustment for two of our senior members of staff, and he says that it was not actually checked with the market. Well, in fact, I said last week that there was a report which has been shared with him which shows that 29 other councils were checked and we were found to be below that level. Councillor is shaking his head. I've been informed by the officers it was sent to you, and I can make sure that it is sent to you to ensure that you see it if you haven't and you've forgotten. So let's think about consultancy. It was the party opposite that had unrestricted, unrivalled spend for consultancy, whereas after we took control in May, I said we have to get to grips with this cost, and so there is now a zero threshold on consultancy, and those are checked each and every time. And finally, in responding to some of the comments from members opposite, I refer to Councillor Ali, who says that in St Thomas's has had a significant underinvestment under the Conservatives, yet he seems to have forgot 6 of the last 8 years in which the Labour Party were in control of this council. Now, I had a long speech about the positive things, which I'm now not going to be able to get through, but I do want to very quickly comment on a couple of things. There was mention of a strategic business partner. That strategic business partner is the person that actually makes sure that our apprenticeship levy in this council is used wisely. An apprenticeship levy that we have to use, or we give it back to central government. We're not in the business of sending money back to government. We're in the business of using it and using it wisely. And if we can't use that this year, and we are taking steps to ensure it's used fully in future years, it will go to our partners so local people benefit from it. Finally, on commercial and procurement, I really wanted to comment on this, and we'll make sure I get it in. So that is a very, very small team in this council, and it's a very, very new department. And whilst we always want to act with even more haste, I am pleased to see that the Revolution portal and the renewed focus on commercialisation that we have put in place has gained over £17 million worth of sales of quality services to our local schools and other organisations. Now, that money is going to be used to put back into the provision and improvement of our services. So, Mr Mayor, whilst I will miss out on time to speak about all the positive things that my colleagues have mentioned already, I welcome the budget, and I think it's a budget that will benefit everyone in this borough, especially the people of my ward in Belle Vale. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. I'm sorry I didn't give you the 30 seconds warning, but I was looking at how many speakers we've got left. There's 4 left, and I propose to name them. There's Councillor Ashton, that's Adam Ashton, the leader, Councillor Hawley, Councillor Casey, and Councillor Roberts. So we've got 4 speakers left. So I will now call upon Councillor Adam Ashton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm relatively certain that he won't, but I wonder if Councillor Clark agrees with me that the distinct lack of meaningful income generation within his budget should be a concern to every single one of us. Local government remains in crisis. The policy of austerity, discretionary cuts in government spending enacted by 3 consecutive Tory governments since 2010 have severely impacted upon the essential public services relied upon by millions of families in our country, services like those provided by this council. Non-ring-fenced government grants to local authorities have fallen from £32.2 billion in 2009-10 to £4.5 billion in 2019-20. Councils like ours have lost almost 60 pence in the pound from central government for local services in the decade to 2020. Mr Mayor, I've spent literally minutes scouring the report for the inspiring and imaginative ways that the controlling group plan to generate income into this authority. And I was shocked to find only 2 references, both of which on page 47. £40,000, which will appear in 2 years' time from advertising revenue on new boundary signs, and increased income from the Dudley Town Hall bar, unless I'm very much mistaken, both of which are projects which began under a Labour administration. On the issue of income generation, we are literally years behind other authorities, Mr Mayor. Authorities like Labour-controlled Oxford, surprisingly, which have become a civil aviation authority licensed to offer commercial drone services, providing building surveying, land mapping and aerial photography, generating over £100,000. Or West Suffolk Council, who have established the largest local authority-owned solar farm in the UK and has recently generated more than 1.5 million of income in its 3rd year, raising nearly 4 million since it began in 2016, thanks to sales to the national grid. Or the London Borough of Brent, who have established a fund to support small and medium-sized enterprises with better rates than a bank, a model which provides a guaranteed return for the council but which covers the risk of bad debt. Mr. Mayor, without fresh ideas, without the injection of private finance, the amount of council tax paid by our residents will surely need to be set at both publicly and politically unacceptable and unaffordable levels. The Labour Party is often depicted by the Tory press as a raving bunch of rabid socialists, wantonly spending other people's money. We're accused of a reliance on tax revenue and grant income, yet here we have a budget, a Conservative budget, devoid of almost any sensible commercial avenues to alleviate some of the burden on the taxpayers of our borough. A budget devoid of imagination, full of assumptions, with an over-reliance on grant funding. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Councillor Hawley.
Wait, calm down. It's coming, it's coming. Mr. Mayor, I'll just touch on a few things before I start the prepared script. You talk about a lack of direction on income generation. Before we had control of the council and you lost your infamous budget when UKIP were represented here, this council didn't even have a correct procurement process. You were signing extensions to contracts because you didn't know when they were ending. So contractors and suppliers had you over this council over a barrel. As for income generation, I believe in the last 12 months we've generated over £17 million from traded services. Mr. Mayor, in this budget, you're not seeing the salami slicing of frontline services that this authority got used to under the party opposite. We've got a commitment to inject cash to boost budgets back to pre-2012 levels when that lot over there came and got control. Tree maintenance, tree planting, increased litter collections, funding to keep the streets tidy, more frequent road sweeping, and £1 million, Mr. Mayor, pumped in over 3 years into road maintenance to replace the money that the deputy leader of the opposition took out when she was cabinet member. Funding increased to empty gullies and dog bins more frequently, road signs replaced, and the reinstatement of a maintenance programme to improve our rights of way. But that's not all, Mr. Mayor. Unlike the party opposite, we've protected funding for children's and adult social care.
Oh, yes.
Never, never, unlike the party opposite, will this group cut budgets to adults and children's just to make a political point. We've shown that we have a budget and we can manage that budget without resorting to the tactics of the opposition over many, many years. But, Mr. Mayor, we also on this side believe in pushing and re-pushing regeneration that stalled under Labour. This includes the £130 million Portersfield mixed-use retail, leisure, residential development, which will comprise up to 500 apartments, including student accommodation and the potential, Councillor Baton, to include shops, restaurants, bars and offices. And yes, Mr. Mayor, as already stated, it includes the demolition of Cavendish House under a Tory council with funding provided by Andy Street, a Tory Metro Mayor.
Yeah, well done, Andy.
In addition, Mr. Mayor, there's the £100 million revitalisation programme of Brierley Hill, which is set to deliver 800 new residential units and 14.7 hectares of improved brownfield land.
Yep.
Elsewhere, Mr. Mayor, there's the 1,000-home urban garden city development of Lye, part of a wider £6 billion Black Country development covering 1,500 hectares. This development is destined to be the biggest housing scheme since the Second World War, showing what a Conservative Metro Mayor and a Conservative Council can achieve working together, and more importantly, Mr. Mayor, showing that Conservatives really do operate a brownfield first policy and that the Green Belt is safe with us.
Yes! Well done.
Away from the residential side of things, Mr Mayor, Invest Dudley is set to announce an almost £14 million expansion of Dudley Zoo, Castle and Castle Hill Woodland, offering 8 key regeneration projects, including Dudley Castle and a visitor and education centre. Then we've also got the second phase, phase 2 of the development of the Black Country Higher Institute of Technology. Strategic town centres having millions pumped into them, 500 million Metro Link extension that will bring probably around 30% more permanent jobs to this borough. Mr Mayor, this budget and our regeneration proposals show that with the Conservatives you have an administration that delivers rather than one which under Labour would offer the people of the borough more delay and more dithering, just like they did in the past.
I was expecting that. Have you got a seconder?
Only second. Put the procedural motion vote be put.
Yeah. Agreed?
I'd like to reply in that case.
I'll call on Councillor Steve Clark to reply to the debate on the original substantive motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The most positive budget in 10 years, and they try and make it negative. Unbelievable. Councillor Zada, you started off so well. You started off so well. We have a good budget. We do have spending pressures. There is spending at risk. What we have decided to do within this Conservative group, there is more good news to come. There is more good news to come later this year. We've decided to have a mini budget in the summer that this year, as soon as we can make sure that some of the risks are under control. This is because we're a prudent administration. A prudent administration that's doing the right thing by the people of Dudley. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
In line with Council Procedure Rule 16.4, I will now put the original substantive motion to a recorded vote. Is that carried? That is carried. As there is no urgent business, so that concludes this meeting of the Council.